We recently asked a couple hundred of you emerging biotech leaders about your go-to sources of information when you face tough professional challenges. Your top response wasn't webinars, it wasn't scientific journals, it wasn't trade shows, it wasn't even consultants. Far and away, you said you most often turn to your peers for trusted insight. Enabling a community of peers is what the Business of Biotech podcast is all about. It's also what our new Business of Biotech newsletter is all about. Peer-driven content, no strings attached, delivered to your inbox once a month. Go to bioprocessonline.com/BOB to subscribe. The Business of Biotech is produced by Bioprocess Online, part of the Life Science Connect community, with support from Cytiva. Cytiva also demonstrates its commitment to the leaders of new and emerging biopharma at cytiva.com/emerging biotech. Check that out. Dr. Kinnari Patel is President and Chief Operating Officer at clinical stage gene therapy company Rocket Pharmaceuticals. And I'm not going to assume that she never tires, but her attack of those dual roles and of her role as an advocate for women in biotech is seemingly tireless. On today's episode of the Business of Biotech, Dr. Patel is here with me to discuss her professional roles at Rocket, whose pipeline constitutes a complex mix of AAV and LVV gene therapies for several rare and devastating inherited genetic diseases. We'll also discuss the role she embraces as a woman in STEM advocate and a mom, the experiences with a who's who of big pharma companies that led her to Rocket, and how she maintains the altruism that led her to biopharma in the first place, and hopefully get a grip on how she balances it all so seemingly effortlessly. Dr. Patel, it's an honor to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here and to talk about things that are near and dear to my heart.
Yeah, as am I. I'm excited to have you as well. And I want to start sort of at the highest level with just a general question about why you started and decided why science. I mean, you and I. So full disclosure for the audience, you and I, Dr. Patel and I were just chatting before we started recording, and I learned that she has like 6 nieces and nephews who graduated with pharma and other medical degrees from Pitt. So I'm assuming it was in the blood, but you tell me, why science?
You know, being a first generation American from that had parents immigrate from India, right? The passion was always about science. The passion from the beginning was I saw so many devastating diseases that took away loved ones around us, and to me, it was mind-boggling. There has to be more we can do this day and age. So passion for science came very early from, working on different test tube experiments in like elementary school. And then really over time, I realized the power of science and medicine could make a difference in humanity as a whole. So the older I got, the more I became even more motivated to pursue a career in science and make a difference.
Yeah, that's outstanding. But plus, I'm not going to discount the fact that there was probably some family pressure. you look around like,
yeah, I mean, either in Indian culture, either you're going to be a doctor or you're going to be a lawyer. So those were the two options. Being a tennis player, other things were not the options.
That's fantastic. You started out like from the outset, coming out of school, sort of in what I would call the big leagues. You worked at Sanofi, Pfizer, Roche, Novartis, BMS, AstraZeneca. Like, I don't know, I'm running out of big league names to throw out there. And then in 2016, you joined Rocket Pharmaceuticals, which is like on the heels of its incorporation. So I'm always intrigued when I talk with, big pharma alumni who join new and emerging biopharma opportunities about the motivation to do that. What was it that led you to make that jump?
Wow, I didn't realize I covered so many companies I have. My career in pharmaceutical and biotech really started with the passion of making a difference in rare disease patient lives. And I was very fortunate to do a postdoc fellowship program at Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson, where I met some great leaders. So my motivation in my career has always been follow great science and products that can make a difference in patient lives, and follow great leaders so you can learn from them. So when Rocket Pharmaceutical was started by Dr. Gaurav Shah and our chairman, Dr. Rod Wang, both of them I had known separately in my life and thought the world of, from not only how intelligent and science-driven they were, but how kind they were. So to have a leader that's kind and is seasoned and willing to mentor and develop people and allow them to be their best selves. So when I got a call from them saying, hey, we're thinking about starting a company, will you join us? Initially, I I laughed and I said, listen, the smallest company I've been at, which I loved, was BMS because it was only 26,000 team members. Now you're telling me you're one. And I'm like, what are you? So it took about 6 months to get there, but the science they were working on was so brilliant. I mean, they told me that after working on oncology, transplant, HIV, and other medications, they were developing therapies that can be one and done curative therapies for patients with rare diseases that may not live to the age of 5 or 10 or 20. And that was just an amazing opportunity that I couldn't give up.
Yeah. Was that gene and gene therapy and rare disease space new to you at the time? I mean, all that extensive experience in the big leagues, did you work on gene therapy or rare diseases in any of those experiences?
I championed rare disease quite a bit at Novartis and at Bristol Myers Squibb and AstraZeneca, but it was never in gene therapy. One of the products that I worked on, which were new to innovation in early 2010, was immuno-oncology. So I worked on Yervoy and Opdivo at BMS, taking Opdivo from an IND to heading towards the BLA filings. So that was the most innovative forefront I was part of. So to do gene therapy and to do it where it was just really becoming something that everyone started talking about, CAR Ts, ex vivo anti-gene therapy, AAV, and to be part of that forefront of innovation was really challenging, exciting. And I knew one thing was sure. I will never be bored.
Yeah. For sure. Was there any apprehension? I mean, it's the human assumption that jumping from the securities of big companies and big pharma and successful roles, mind you, at those companies into a fledgling company that was looking for money, right? I mean, these are non-revenue generating companies. I can only imagine that there's got to be a little bit of apprehension, and if so, how did you kind of overcome that?
I was very nervous. And honestly, there were 2 or 3 things that made this all possible. One, my husband is just such a supportive person and he knows me so well. And he said, listen, you're always trying to fight for this. Why not just be in a company where you can form a company culture to focus on things and patients and be able to be part of that storytelling of building something brand new that you, instead of trying to change everything around you. That was great. The second component was having companies like AstraZeneca and BMS say, hey, try it. And if it doesn't work, you can always come back to us, was a safety net. Worst case, I could always go back to Big Pharma, which was a great thing. And the third thing was I knew that during this opportunity, even if it was 6 months that I was going to try Rocket and it didn't succeed, the amount of learnings I would have with doing something different, as scary as it was, I felt like I didn't want to be comfortable in doing what I was doing. So it was a challenge worth taking. And I had a found system to support me to do that.
Yeah, very, very good. When you joined in 2016, did you come right on as president and COO, or did you start in a different role?
No, the CEO at the time was like, hey, do you want to start as a president? And I'm like, I don't know what a president qualified. I'm like, as a woman leader, I've always been one of those individuals that said, if I haven't done something and done it well, I'm not going to take on the responsibility and the title. So I said, what I can do is regulatory, safety, quality, compliance. So I started as a vice president of regulatory, quality, safety, and compliance at Rocket. That's not what normally people do. And that's not what I'm advocating for individuals to do. But for me, experiences allowed me to have confidence to do something right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And now, I mean, those experiences, I'm sure, have been additive to your leadership as COO, which, I would argue is probably one of the most challenging positions in particularly new and emerging biopharma, because you cover so many bases. I mean, your role calls on you to oversee regulatory, clinical execution, global program teams, alliance management, CMC, quality and development. And I'm sure more, right? I mean, those are the official bullet points, but I'm sure there's more. So just give us some insight in that role, what the keys are to embracing and, I guess, successfully executing on such a diverse range of responsibilities. That's a big unfair question to ask.
No, I love the question. And actually, when we were going to go public in 2018, in 2017, mid 2017, our CEO said, hey, we're going to go public in the next 6 months. You should be the official COO. And I'm like, I don't know what a COO does. What do you mean COO? He's like, you're doing IT, HR, finance, and everything else. That's the COO job. You're doing everything anyways. You just don't have the title and the compensation for it. And that took me a bit back. And I said, listen, wait, We're a company of 10 individuals. I'm just doing things that need to be done in order for us to succeed. Right. So I think that's the mind frame. What I realized when I started researching COO is every CEO has a different background, and you can really make the role what you think is needed for the company and what your strengths are. So for me, I realized that my strength is I can integrate different functions really well. And my head works like I have a domino in my head where any new information, I know what the risk and rewards and opportunities are on an ongoing basis. I just can't turn off my brain from working that way. I go to a shop, right, and I know what is the easiest steps, number of steps you need to take to get to the front door, right? That's how I think A to B is the most efficient way. So for CEO, for me, I just kept doing what I needed to. So initially I did HR, IT. As we became a more established company with more clinical proof of concept, stronger investor base, more investor money, we started hiring experts that can do these jobs better than us. So I think what I realized the success of COO is you fill in the gaps where you need to help make sure that in a biotech and pharmaceutical company, your products get to the patients that need it as fast as possible and the highest quality product possible. And I think when you do that, you define your own role. So to me, the lessons learned, I have few colleagues that have reached out from my prior big pharma world saying, I'm thinking about going to become a CEO in biotech. What should I think about? What should the role be? I said, look at your own authentic self, right? What are the things you enjoy doing? What are the things that are your strengths from your prior learnings? And do those two bridge well with the company's needs? And if they do, for 80% or 70% of the time, go for it because you're going to be great at it.
That's interesting. And it's super insightful advice, Dr. Patel, because it's not. I love the point that you make about it not being necessarily a prescriptive role. It's so organizationally dependent. So I think the takeaway to do research on the needs of the company in that CEO, it's not like being a lead scientist where it's pretty prescriptive what you're working on. So super insightful advice. The other thing that strikes me about the role of COO at Rocket and the levels of responsibility that you have is that you see so much. You see the good, you see the bad, you see the ugly, you see the promising science, you see the scientific failures, you see the financial wins, you see the financial losses, like you see it all. And I can only imagine that, that would be at times, as I said in my intro, you're seemingly tireless, but it seems like that might be something that would make one weary, right? Having access and exposure to all that. And I read a story about an experience you had. I failed to mention that you also work for the FDA's Office of Orphan Products Development. And I read a story about an experience you had when you were there that left you wondering why candidates with promising early data would not be further developed because that candidate might not make enough money to overcome its R&D costs. And that's, that's something that I think weighs on a lot of people in this industry. At the time when you were with the Office of Orphan Products and Development, you were a young, energetic, aspiring, scientist. And I can see where that sort of altruism would, lead you to that conclusion. Like, my God, I need to do something to further these candidates that are otherwise left by the wayside. Now that you've been in the industry for so many years, I see you maintaining that altruism and that energy and that expectation. How do you do that? Again, sort of an unfair question to ask, but like, what's kind of built into Dr. Patel that enables you to continue the pursuit of that ideal?
When I did that rotation with FDA Orphan Products, it was such an honor. I worked with Dr. Marlene Hefner, and she was a division director for years, and she helped develop orphan drug regulations and bring them from US to EU, Japan, and other parts of the world. I saw the fight she was fighting. And then I met the patients and parents and the story you're talking about. I was devastated that if there is a drug available, why can't a patient have access if they need it? And why is the revenue stopping somebody from getting access to a therapy that could save a person's life, especially a kid's life, right? This all comes into my idealism of making a difference in humanity comes from, honestly, my parents and my grandma. No matter how much money they had or how much access to education or resources they had, they devoted their life to making their communities better every step of the way. And so I grew up with the notion that if you're a good person, right, just try to do two things right. Be a good person and give back what you have to others and make a difference in this world. So I grew up with those two philosophies every step of the way. And my husband is one of the kindest person in the world. So, he said, hey, if you're making a difference in all these kids' lives, let's make sure you have the support to do it. And he absolutely has been my anchor and the rock that has kept me going when days are tough, right? There are tough days. But I, on one hand, feel excited and humbled to do something that I love to do and have this family support to do it. That's one. And the two is, I honestly believe that if we can seek cures, one and done potential cures for devastating diseases that people are born with, we are going to change the trajectory of healthcare and how patients live their life, and be in a place where a patient's DNA that they're born with or damaged DNA doesn't define their life or their loved one's life and caregiver's life. So to be part of that, I just honestly remind myself on tough days that it's such an honor to do what I do. And I feel so privileged. And I think that's what keeps me going. And in a biotech world, there's just so much energy and passion. So we're lucky that at Rocket, so many like-minded people are around us that if one person has a bad day, the other person's passion and positivity kind of lifts you up. And that makes a difference in having that culture of collaboration, family-oriented environment, and just a support system we have for each other.
Yeah. Fantastic. Another recent story that I saw, I don't know if it was, I think I saw it on LinkedIn. I don't know if it was on your post or someone posting about you, but it was this, it was a picture of you on a television screen. You were doing an interview, I think for women in STEM on like Cheddar News. And the picture was not like the picture, the television was like up on a, in an entertainment center. And there was a picture of your daughter in front of the television screen looking up at you, and her arms were like wide open, right? Like her arms were wide open, like she wanted to embrace you on the screen, and like as if she were rooting for you, right? In this interview. And it struck me as interesting and I guess inspirational a little bit, because, there you are, and there's your daughter looking on and cheering you on. And it begs the question how I guess how personal it is for you to be a crusader for women in STEM and women in biopharma in particular.
It's that picture. Oh my God. That picture is just one of the best memories I will have for my rest of my life. Right.
Yeah.
And I am actually quite an introvert. I would love to just dive in, work on the science, put pen to paper. And so TV interviews, these types of things is not my comfort zone. Our CEO is amazing at it. He's a Grammy nominated musician. So I always say, hey, you should be the face of Rocket and I'll just do the back end things, right? But I think picture like that reminded me that as uncomfortable as I am with my communication outwards, there are women that need role models. And if I can serve as an inspiration, a role model you can pursue your passion and your dream, and you don't have to fit a particular mold, right? You can just do what you love to do and succeed at it and make a difference. And remember, I think that picture reminded me that no matter what I do at home or at work or in debates and discussions I have on panels, on congresses, there are other people looking up. So I need to make sure that not only do I do the right thing for what's meaningful for what I believe, but also be an inspiration, because we are still paving the path. In the biotech healthcare industry, there are not that many women leaders that have succeeded to important jobs that can make a big difference in this industry. And I think that's a disservice to the healthcare industry. So if there's anything I can do on sharing my lessons learned, giving hope, or just saying, how can I mentor you, develop you, and be your executive sponsor to get there? I would love to do that. It's my personal line. It's something that we just need more of to be better as an industry leader.
Yeah, I guess there are follow-up questions I want to try to unpack in that statement. One of them would be like, what experiences as a female executive in biopharma what have you experienced that have sort of underscored the importance of you embracing that role? And I'm not looking for, I'm not looking to do an expose here on, on potentially, damaging experiences. I'm just curious, like in the daily course of your transition from through big pharma and into Rocket and through even back into your academic days. what sort of inspires you to want to continue that advocacy?
I always feel like I learn from the best around me of what works really well and what doesn't. And what I saw were, early in my career, I saw that a lot of women that were putting in 2x the hours and effort just to get a name on a publication. Instead of being the lead publishing person, they were just glad and grateful to have a name of their contribution on a publication. That's what I saw when I was in academics. And I didn't understand that concept. I'm like, you're doing all the work. You're doing twice the work. Why are you just happy of getting a name on the paper? It's like, well, it's better than not getting recognized at all, right? So I realized very early in pharmacy school when I was doing my genetic research and publications that this was a problem. And it's something that's a norm. And I think when I initially started the pharmaceutical industry career, I was working hard to work on a filing in my early days. To work on a new drug getting to the market was like the most challenging, coolest thing a regulatory person could do, right? And I was really doing everything under the sun to show that I'm qualified and could have an opportunity to do this. And one of my colleagues, he comes in, he's like, oh, I got assigned to this project. He's like, isn't this what you wanted? I'm like, when did that happen? I've been like working my behind off for 6 months trying to show I can add value. And he's like, oh, I actually didn't want it. But at the poker night last night, they were talking, it would be fun for me to be involved. It'd be good exposure for me. So they assigned me to it. And I think that's kind of the experiences I had. And all of those experiences, the good ones where I got championed by women leaders and other executives that were mindful, intentionally providing opportunities, and organizations like HBA that were supporting how to communicate better, how to get sponsorship, how to get the projects that will help you showcase what you can do, to the things that may not have been great. What we've done at Rocket is incorporate all of those best practices here. So we let people's work speak for itself. And that's kind of been the passion at Rocket is, hey, if you do, you get opportunities, not because, I don't know, if you play poker or golf or a football team that you're a fan of, or, cooking night, it doesn't matter either way. You get opportunities because you deserve it and you can add value to the pipeline, or you're the future potential individual that can grow into an opportunity, right? So to me, that's been intentionally done at Rock. Very proud of the culture which has the best of everything we've seen, and eliminated some of the things that I thought was challenging to provide equal opportunity to individuals with different backgrounds and diversity.
As manufacturers look to automate, scale, and reduce risk in cell therapy process development, there are more options than ever before. Tune in each week to learn about cell processing, manufacturing platforms, and more. The pod is brought to you in collaboration with Cytiva, a global provider of technologies and services that advance and accelerate the development, manufacture, and delivery of therapeutics, including cell therapies. Check out their resources at cytiva.com/emerging biotech. That's CYTIVA.com/emerging biotech. Yeah, you two words that struck me in your response to that question: mindfulness and intentionality. I have a lot of conversations with. I shouldn't say a lot, because we're 160 probably episodes into this podcast, and a small percentage of them have been with, to your point, executives who are female in biopharma. So not a lot, but we intentionally attempt to go down that road. And in a lot of those conversations I have, there's the it's a conversation about championing and, having the, being a crusader. But when we drill down to like what you're doing that's intentional and mindful to be that crusader and to be that champion, specifics are sometimes lacking. Can you share like some thoughts on like what specific forums, avenues, actions that women can take to support one another in bio, and maybe some of that stuff that's going on at Rocket?
Absolutely. So one of the things I saw research in early 2010 that showed that a lot of scientists are women. Disproportional, higher than 50% scientists start off in the labs, but they never make it to director or higher level because they're not able to communicate their scientific concept, because they're not exposed to opportunities to present their ideas in presentation skills, right? PowerPoint or verbal or papers, things along those lines. So what we do at Rocket is when individuals join at Rocket, they have opportunities to present in breakfast and learn, lunch and learn opportunities of what they do And it could be things that they do content-wise at Rocket, or it could be something that they love doing. Like, during COVID, we hosted cooking shows, right? Where people would just be in their kitchen, and being able to verbalize what you love to do is a great way to just tangibly advance your communication skills and become visible as a leader, as a person, as a whole person, not just a person at work. So that's one thing we do. The second thing we've been very mindful of in my lessons learned is from the beginning, every 6 months, we look at everyone's compensation, right? And make sure there's equality in compensation based on work, contributions, titles, etc. And this helps not just women and individuals with diverse background, but it also helps individuals with the longest tenure at the company. I don't know if you knew this, but individuals that have the longest tenure in a company often get paid the least in that role, right? Because the new markets keep changing. So what I saw in one of the bigger pharmaceuticals I was working and supporting my functional leader is individuals that were director for 10 years were getting paid about 30-40% less because they weren't advocating with the market value of what existed in the current market. So new hire that would come into director with even maybe less experience will get a higher compensation. So to me, it didn't make sense. If you're in the company longer, you know more, you can add a greater impact. Why are you getting paid less? So what we try to do is course correct for individuals that have been here longer, because the market data of how you negotiate keeps changing, right? The inflation and everything else allows people to keep up to current. So we every 6 months, we look at everyone's compensation. So people that have been here 5 years at this title and at contribution get paid same as the newest person that negotiated their compensation. So I think these are some of the things we intentionally do behind the scenes. The other components we do is what we found is a lot of times when individuals don't understand the full context of what they're doing, why they're doing it, it doesn't allow them to be as impactful and have more barriers, right? Of being able to influence and bring their creative thought process to a problem or solution to a problem that others may not have thought about. So at Rocket, we developed gene therapy drug development training certification program. So every 6 months, every new team member that joins Rocket gets a training in every single one of our products, our science, our HR, our legal. How do you do contract negotiations? So they get a full training over 2 weeks. And if they finish the quizzes, they can have these, and pass them, of course, which is relatively easy to do. You get the certificate that says that even if you're a manufacturing associate or somebody in HR or in regulatory, you understand the full picture what Rocket is trying to accomplish. When you understand the full picture what you're trying to accomplish, your role, you can understand the work you do day to day, how it impacts the bigger picture. And what we found is when we do that, it allows people to understand the context, ask the questions that they may not have been comfortable asking, or knowing and presenting the ideas that they have that they've not thought about presenting because they're like, hey, I'm too shy. Maybe I don't know something somebody else does. So there are subtle ways that we've kind of made an environment where we open dialogue to have more constructive, direct feedback and have the best ideas rise to the decision making.
I'm so happy with that response, Dr. Patel, because I alluded to I try to get into these conversations on many occasions, and there's sort of some soft, fluffy answers. That was super concrete. I mean, that's beautiful. Like those are very specific examples. And I love it. When I think about your response, though, I think and full disclosure, so Gaurav has been my guest on the show. So I know him a little bit, right? And I know his leadership style. And I fully get that he is an embracer of diversity and inclusion and equality. But at the same time, some of the things that you just mentioned, the opportunity to hone presentation skills, training programs, and super specifically like compensation review, you don't, even a COO, you don't just go in and say, okay, this is how we're going to do it. We're going to do these things, like not without buy-in, both upstream and downstream, right? And peripheral buy-in. And again, I know, I'm not going to say that's been easy for you, but I know that Gaurav probably hasn't been a stumbling block for you in that effort. But I'm curious about your thoughts on how to solicit and win buy-in from your colleagues and as I said, the folks perhaps upstream who need to sign off on some of these initiatives.
Yeah. I am so lucky that Gaurav has been this amazing inspirational leader. His philosophy is everyone has a zone of genius, and our job is to make sure that we help them find it and make the most out of that zone of genius. So I think that's a very positive outlook. So he's allowed and enabled me to really bring these ideas and make it easier. So I think for individuals that are looking to get buy-in and to make their ideas be known, what I found is whether you're trying to get a idea to be bought in within your own team, your colleagues, or your boss or boss's boss, you have to talk about the why first and foremost. I think the value proposition of, for example, people are used to normally having org charts when they join a company. So when they join Rocket, they're like, where's the org chart? I want to know who I report to and who reports to who. Well, at Rocket, we don't have an org chart, right? It's something every 6 months I'm asked, and I keep coming up with the rationale why we shouldn't put out an org chart. I'm sure it will change one day to make the company run more efficiently. We have accountability chart, right? The thinking here is, my articulation of this example is, what do we need to know people do, right? It's what are they accountable for? What are the expertise that they have? Which projects are they involved in? What is their role and responsibility? If you can find that without knowing who they report to, what their titles are, right? What's the value versus the downside, right? If we have the best minds, and if we really have the philosophy that it doesn't matter who you report to and what your title and what the hierarchy is, we want you to give your ideas and be equal to us. How better to do that than not to put out this barrier of titles and hierarchy? Yes, it exists, but why have it as a prominent thing? So what we tell team members is, when you're invited to a meeting, that means you have value to add. If you're in a meeting with Garo and you're a scientist or a director or VP, doesn't matter. You have just as much opportunity to speak your mind as Garo or I do. And that's how kind of we've done a little subtle things to break down the barriers. So in this proposal, every time we have new individuals that come and join in different parts of the organization, saying, just give it up. What's the harm in it, right? There's no harm in it, but is there a different way we can do things where we can cultivate a culture that shows collaboration, that shows oneness, right? And unity. These are little things. So what I would tell individuals, if you have an idea you want to pursue, provide the why, provide the vibe versus the alternative, and what are the pros and cons associated with it to your best of your ability. And I think at the minimum, even if your ideas aren't agreed to or supported, people know how you're thinking about it. So to me, a lot of times it's not the answer, it's the reason behind the question and the problem that makes a difference in getting to a better solution. So that's kind of been the philosophy that I've talked about, the why and the value proposition.
The why and the value. So I want to kind of segue into an opportunity to talk about some of the work that Rocket is doing, but I'm wondering if you can take a stab at making a connection between why this conversation that we're having about equity and inclusion and diversity is important to the North Star at Rocket. Does that make sense?
Completely. So for us, the North Star is really, we want to make as many therapies available to patients that need it around the world. So less patients suffer from devastating life-threatening diseases. And it's not just the patient that suffer. The diseases we work on are so severe. It really takes the whole village of not just the parents, the grandparents, siblings, the entire village of their friend circle and everyone supporting them through this devastating disease, being in and out of hospitalization, or unfortunately kids passing away in their single-digit years, right? So to eliminate that is our goal. And if you think about caregivers, if you think about the population that's being impacted by the genetic diseases we work on, these patients, these individuals that are impacted are all over the world, right? With all kinds of different backgrounds, different barriers, different economic situations. So to us, if the people we're treating is represented in the company that we have, right, it allows us to really make a thoughtful decision and make it a thoughtful and as easy as possible way for patients to get access to therapy. For example, we had a family from Middle East that came in for a clinical study in the US. One of our team members on his own said, I know they have dietary restrictions. This is the first time they're in America, in the US. They're going to be scared. So him and his kids baked all these cookies and bought all these groceries from their Middle Eastern store that they went to, and bought all this so they can feel comfortable in their transition, because they knew that they were about to embark on a gene therapy study. And that's hard to begin with, and let alone to do it in a new country where you don't speak the language or even understand the food options, right? So those kind of things, you can't train people to do that as part of their job, right? this team member did that because he's like, I understand, because my background, I understand the challenges when you move to a different country, what you go through and what little things could make a big difference in overcoming this hurdle. So to us, it's representing our science, where it's going to make an impact, and having that representation of women leaderships. If you think about it, most of the, there were surveys out there, and I'm blanking on the percent, but most of the women in the house are actually the ones that go to pharmacy and take even their husbands and, parents, grandparents, and kids to the doctors, right?
Mm-hmm.
If the case, having more women in different decision-making paradigm of science, of data, of drug development, having their perspective is so valuable because they'll know what is important to the patients that need it, and the caregivers. As a caregiver and as a scientist, they can bridge that much better. And I think that diversity of thought process they bring to the table and the questions they ask, if this was my child, if this was my loved one, what would I do differently? Right? It kind of makes a big difference. It seems subtle, but it makes such a big difference in how we do what we do. So when days get tough, I look at my daughter, I'm like, if she was sick, the mountains I would climb through to make a therapy available for her. If I do that for her, other kids need that opportunity, right? And other individuals to champion. So that's kind of the philosophy we have at Rocket.
Yeah, I was going to ask you how your role as mom influences your role as COO at Rocket, but I think you just answered that beautifully. Yeah.
People thought once I had a kid, they're like, "Oh, you're going to forget the Rocket and pursuing rare diseases." I came back after my having the baby and even more motivated and more passionate about doing this faster, better, and for more diseases, for more patients.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a perfect segue into the diseases and the patients that Rocket's serve. And give us, I want to give you an opportunity before we wrap up here to share with us what Rocket's working on and maybe give us an update on where the company is in terms of its clinical progress.
Definitely. So at Rocket, we're seeking gene therapy cures. We're trying to advance a very integrated pipeline through two different types of technology in gene therapy. One technology, ex vivo lenti's, where we use patient's own cell, put in the corrected gene of interest and give it back to the patient. So talk about individualized medicine to the core. Patient gets their own cells with the corrected gene back to them. The other technology we use, AAV, is an ex vivo program where we infuse the corrected gene or the missing or the damaged gene back to the patient. In either way, what we're doing is we have a pipeline that's quite robust of heme or of blood disorders. And we have 3 programs in the blood disorders. And then we have 3 programs in the cardiac diseases. And so our pipeline is really focused on heme, which Fanconi anemia is a rare disease. That's actually, we've already finished our phase 1/2 global study across US, Europe, and UK. And we're heading end of this year to the FDA and EMA to get this drug approved because there are hundreds of patients that are waiting for this therapy. And there have been decades of research done to support how gene therapy could be a great treatment option for these patients with devastating disease. The second one is, everyone at Rocket at Champions has their own favorite. So the second one is LED1, leukocyte adhesion deficiency. This is a program that I've championed from beginning, from licensing it to now. We're about to submit this to the FDA for approval. This disease, unfortunately, 2/3 of the kids die by the age of 2. And what we've shown in the 9 kids we've treated is all 9 kids, not only are they alive, but they're thriving. They're living normal kids' life of going to daycare, no more hospitalization, antibiotic needs, etc. So what you see is a drastic change from before to after. And we're really passionate about bringing this therapy to patients because it's really pursuing excellence in science. And the second hematology disease we're working on is pyruvate kinase deficiency. So as you know, normal hemoglobin for us is around 12. And that means we have enough oxygen that goes around the body so we can do what we need to do daily. In PKD severe disease, unfortunately, the patients we're treating, their hemoglobin level is between 6 to 8. They need transfusions just to keep going day to day. And even with the transfusion dependencies that they have, unfortunately, they're not able to live a normal life. And what we've done is we've treated patients, we've treated 3 patients to date. 2 of them, we've had 2 years data. Their hemoglobin went from 6 to 8 at baseline to normal 12 to 14 range. And these individuals are transfusion independent, getting a job and going back to a life that they had never had before, which is remarkable. So we're excited about our heme pipeline going to the patients across the US and Europe. In cardiovascular, gene therapy for cardiovascular had been tried so many times before. And unfortunately, the science is complicated for gene therapy to begin with, and diseases like heart disease are complicated. For the first time, we've been able to solve that equation. So for Danon disease, this is a disease, heart disease, where unfortunately young boys get diagnosed at the age of 8 to 12. And unfortunately, if they don't get a heart transplant by the age of 19, 20, they pass away. So talk about devastation in a whole different way. This cardiac disease also impacts females, and females pass away, unfortunately, in their mid-30s. So there's just as much devastation in males and females, and truly one of the worst heart diseases out there. What we've shown in patients we've treated is these patients, after gene therapy, are going into their 20s without needing a transplant and going to college. And one of them got his own apartment. This other kid who wasn't able to trick or treat, we found out from a mom that, hey, last year he needed to be put into a wagon and just taken from house to house and few houses just to participate as a normal kid. This time, after the 2-hour town, 6 to 8 trick-or-treating time slot that they had in the township expired, and he was running door to door and didn't want to give up trick-or-treating all night long because he was like, I can live a normal kid's life. And that's the transformation we've seen. We have other 2 programs that are also going to the clinic. One of them is in the clinic called Pegasus PKP2, which is another devastating cardiac disease, and a BAG3. So what our goal is this is our starting point. Just as many programs that are publicly known, which are 6, we have just as many programs as ideas and discoveries. And what we found at Rocket is if we do drug development efficiently, if we follow science, if we learn lessons learned from ourselves, but other companies and other investigators around the world that are brilliant minds we get to work with and collaborate with, we can bring an idea to an actual drug product that can go to patient in about 2 years. And then for the first time, what we're seeing for LED1, we went to clinic for the first time in patients in 2018, 2019 early timeframe. Now we're taking it already to commercialization. Normally, drug development takes 15 to 20 years. We're able to consolidate that with using the best practices of following the science, focusing on patients' unmet medical need, having patient feedback involved from day one in designing the right study that will be meaningful for them, and also the physicians that treat these diseases, getting their voices to be heard of what's important to them. So I think when we do this in a collaborative, integrated fashion, we're able to accelerate drug development, especially working with FDA and EMA transparently every step of the way. So we hope that what we've done in these 6 programs, we can rinse and repeat for more diseases and help hundreds of thousands of patients around the world. So as you see, I could keep going all the time because I love what we do at Rocket, and I think we can truly be a catalyst for transformation in healthcare. Yeah,
no, it's fantastic work. And, as you're talking and sharing some of those stories, I asked you about your perception as a mom and COO at Rocket. I'm a dad, and as you're telling these stories, I'm feeling the same thing you're feeling. I'm feeling the value. That's you're very compelling. And I appreciate the work that you're doing as an advocate for women in bio as well. I mean, it's like I said, sometimes these are tricky conversations to have, but you put a lot of concrete examples behind that advocacy, and I like that. So, what haven't I asked you, Dr. Patel, that I should have asked you, or that you feel is part of the story that I haven't given you an opportunity to tell?
Well, I think you've covered all the components. I think honestly, for us, it's just we chip away at good science and collaboration and teamwork. And I think the only additional thing I would add is for Rocket, for what we do, it's not just about what we do, but how we do makes a difference, right? Because if you're trying to create a legacy, if you're trying to get next generation of scientists to be developed and passionate to make a difference in healthcare, and if you're trying to be role models, the what is going to matter, but also the how is going to matter even more. So I think for Rocket, our value is really about being trust, giving trust and forming that trusted relationship from beginning, right? Having generosity and curiosity. If we're generous with our not just knowledge, our time, our energy, and our passion, and bring our whole selves to work in everything we do, I think we can make a difference. But no matter how much you feel like you know, being humble and being curious to say, I know this, but here are all the things I don't know. And it's a puzzle of expertise that we need together. I think that puzzle piece is what's made Rocket really special, is while we have some brilliant minds like Garo and others, and David Ricks and other scientists that are working in this company, right? The fact is, every step of the way, they're like, I know this, but I don't know X, Y, and Z. And we learn from each other continuously. And I think if we continuously have those conversations based on generosity, curiosity, and the foundation of trust, we can elevate each individual person working at Rocket, the therapies we work on, and the ecosystem. And so to us, it's all about lifting up what we do and how we do around the world. And so to me, I think that's the take-home message I would give to individuals. Follow your passion, but how you follow it is going to matter. If you do it collaborative versus sharp elbows, right? It differentiates how much difference you can really make in your whole life, not just for that one moment in time.
Yeah, that's a fitting place to end, Dr. Patel. I appreciate it. I really enjoyed having you on the show. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate being able to talk about these things. And thank you for really caring about how we do things that we do at biotech, science, and in advocacy. We really appreciate your support in this.
For sure. Yeah. So that's Rocket Pharmaceuticals President and COO, Dr. Kinnari Patel. I'm Matt Pillar, and this is the Business of Biotech. We're produced by Bioprocess Online and sponsored by Cytiva, whose support of new and emerging biopharma companies is on full display at cytiva.com/emerging biotech. If you like listening in on conversations like this one with Dr. Patel, subscribe to the Business of Biotech podcast and sign up for our newsletter at bioprocessonline.com/BOB. Also, be sure to leave us a review. Let us know how we're doing. And as always, thanks for listening.